My name is Lee Taylor Young.
John Morton. First time I met JR was in Lake Tahoe, and he was at a seminar. And what I remember about that is that he started out by saying, how many of you are here for the first time? And I responded, live seminar, and he said, what, the other seminars are dead? And so that got me thinking, like I was thinking more about what did he mean by that, not really listening so much to what he was saying. It took me a while to catch up.
The first time I met JR was the fall of 1973. I think, I can't quite remember the year Prana was bought. So it was just after Prana was bought, and a few people were living there. And Sally Kirkland invited me to a John Rogers seminar. I'd already heard 3 tapes and I heard them all at one time, and they were so powerful for me that I walked up and down Benedict Canyon at 4 o'clock in the morning, and all I was hearing inside was, this man is telling me the truth. And so I went quickly to my first seminar. I think it was one of the first to open at Prana, and I was hiding behind one of the beams in the living room because I was very, very shy, and all of a sudden I was in a room of like 200 people. And JR came in from the other entrance, and I remember the first thing I thought was, this is a spiritual master, his pants are too short and his socks are white and he's wearing polyester. And then he walked towards me, and as he walked towards me, being familiar already with a very kind of powerful path that I'd been in before with Muktananda, I was sort of familiar with very expansive, high spiritual energy, and he just got within 10 feet of me, and I felt like I couldn't even blink. And he just came across the room. Oh, came into the room, and Sally, in her inimitable fashion, screamed out, JR, here's that actress, Lee Taylor Young. And I really thought I was going to disappear. He came up to me across the room, took my hands, and he said, I'm so glad to see you. And inwardly I heard, I've been waiting for you. And I watched the seminar and felt the seminar. And the next day I came and met with Polly McGarry and bought every tape of JR's, being forewarned of spiritual indigestion. And that was the beginning for me.
John, yeah, take your question back. When was the first time you met JR?
Right.
Mention years and the whole thing.
First time I met JR was in Lake Tahoe. I think it was 1975 in the summer, and I was living in Sacramento, and there were a couple people that were involved in the seminars we were doing at that time at my apartment. And we went up for an aura bounce, and then he was going to be doing a seminar that night in Ann Solar's home. And I was basically leaning back with my eyes closed because a friend of one of the people I came with was doing foot reflexology on me. I'd never had that, so I was very relaxed, and I heard this man's voice say, hello, John, from across the room. And then I said hello, and then he went into the back part of the house, and I didn't know who he was, and then they were looking at me with these like grins on their face, and I said, what are you looking at? And he said, well, don't you know who that was? And I said, no, that was John Roger. And I asked him, well, did you introduce me? And I found out that nobody had introduced me, so that was another one of those one-liners that JR would often do, where I'd be thinking about it for a long time. Like, how did he know me? To say hello, John.
Wow.
I have a few of those, but go ahead.
Well, the one that came up, so I'll go with that, was my prior teacher had been Muktananda, and I'm now with John Roger. And someone calls me and says Muktananda is having diabetic strokes and very ill in San Francisco hospital. So I decided I would go up and see him. And as I'm leaving the house, the phone rings. I pick it up, and this was different times, of course, and it was JR. And he said, what are you up to? I said, well, I'm just about to go to the airport to go up and see Muktananda. He's had all these strokes and he's ill. He said, give him my love, would you? He said, please make sure you give him my love. And I said, I will. I went up there. I'm taken into Muktananda's room. He's laying there, and this instinct came over me, and I just sort of threw myself, in a gentle way, of course, on his chest, and he held me, and this just absolute lightning bolt of purple light went through my body into Muktananda. And it just kept like pulsating through me, and Baba just kept holding me to him. And then when I moved back, he looked at me, and in Hindi he said, "Thank you." I fly back to LA, I get in the house, just walk in the house, the phone rings, and it's John Roger, and he says, "Oh, by the way, how's Baba?" And I told him what happened, and he said, yes. He said, I was blessing him. That certainly is one, and I mean, my whole life is a miracles of John Rogers stories, so I'll just end with that one and pass it to John.
Well, one story I remember is actually having to do with the dogs. John Roger loves dogs. And so back then there were 2 Weimaraners, there was Zotar and Player, and then there were 2 poodles, Pookie and Dude. And so there used to be a ritual, like when we would come back to the house, and what I remember is Jer would say, "Okay, all dogs outside." They'd have to go out onto the patio with the sliding glass door into the kitchen, and then they'd all be like wagging their tails, waiting, sitting, waiting to be called, and then he would call them in one at a time. And when he called Pookie and the black poodle, which I think was the one he had the longest, and it seemed like there was the deepest connection with this dog, he looked down at Pookie, said, "Pookie, where's the safest place in the world?" And Pookie leaped all the way up to his chest, and Jared caught him, and then he laid his head on Jared's heart, like a demonstration. And I was awestruck because on the one hand it was a nice dog trick, but on the other hand it was a very powerful message for me about where is the safest place in the world. And it always moved me about, if I was ever questioning whether JR knows or should know, the best approach was always to come to him directly and tell him. And that wasn't easy at times. There were things that I did not want to tell him, but it was always, to me, demonstrated that he was this very safe place, that if I would come to him, anyone would just come to him straight, that there was always a safe place.
Cool, let's keep rolling. Pop your head out there and tell, just tell him to be quiet.
I have an anecdote, Zeus.
We're rolling in here. We're interviewing John and Lee, so can we all keep it quiet? Okay, so let me tell them. Hey guys.
Lori, just sit right in the steps. Sit in the steps, please. Right there, thanks. Let's keep focused. Close the door. Dean, talk to me. We're good? Thor.
Yes, we're fine.
All right.
I have
Hold
one.
on. We're going to keep going. We're good?
We're good.
That was great. And let's do another story. Go, Lee.
One that comes to mind is I had a prior marriage. I know we don't know about it. To a very sort of powerful fellow in the film business. One of his clients was Natalie Wood. And he and I were married in Natalie Wood's home with a lot of people from the business. When Natalie died, who he had met many times through me, I asked him, how was that for her? And he said, well, he took her out of the body minutes before she drowned. And that was one of those things that deeply touched me. And he said that, that he was with her and helping her heal on the other side. There were many more parts to it, but it was, to me, such a beautiful thing to know that how the Spirit works and how he was working with the people he'd met who were not initiates and were not ministers.
You guys knew him longer.
I have one where we were at the Hamburger Hamlet, that used to be Hamburger Hamlet in the one you took me to recently.
Brentwood.
Yeah, in Brentwood. And with my son ordered a vanilla milkshake. And I said, you know, Jared, would you like a vanilla milkshake? And he said, I'd love a vanilla milkshake, but I'm not going to have one. So when it came to my son Patrick said, well, would you like some of it, Jared? How about a straw? And he said, I can't have any of it because I'll eat the whole thing. So this is my first introduction to how much JR loved vanilla ice cream. He did a little seminar on how much he loved vanilla ice cream.
Well, I'm sure I have lots of food stories with JR. But what I would look at as favorite is actually pancakes with eggs over easy, maple syrup, cup of coffee. So I used to also make that for him as well. I wasn't very good at eggs over easy, but the pancakes I was pretty good at. And you know, the very first time I went to dinner with him was the place called the Jetty. It used to be called the Jetty. It was on the PCH at the foot of Sunset. And we went there for barbecued ribs and pina coladas. And I thought, well, the spiritual stuff's pretty good, you know. You know, because I was not expecting that what JR would eat would be like he loved the barbecued ribs and whatever else it was, French fries, and then we were having pina coladas. So I thought, this is pretty good if this is how it's going to be. And at that point, I didn't know what would happen because I wasn't part of staff. That was the very first day I talked to him about working with him. And then that night I ended up spending the night in the MSI motorhome, which was kind of legendary at one time as well.
I have another one. JR, this is about 1974, and he took about 30 people over to Catalina on the ferry. And at this point in my life, I was a very, I would have to say, rigid vegetarian. And through some people's influence, I saw meat eaters as carnivores. I'd gotten kind of rigid and judgmental. And we got off the ferry, and JR said to me, would you like to take a little walk? And of course, wow. Yes, I would. And so we're walking, and then he rather quickly said, are you hungry? And I said, yes. And he took me into a Greasy Spoon. That was his first choice. And it was really a diner with the stools and smell of burning hamburger. And I'm like in shock going, well, he'll probably have a glass of water. You know, we sit down on the stools, and he said, well, what would you like to eat? And I said, oh, no, you go first. So he ordered a hamburger, French fries, a milkshake, a cup of coffee, and an Excedrin. Asked if they had Excedrin. I mean, every cell in me was like trying to process this. I was in shock. And he said, well, what are you going to have? And I was trying to, do you have Jell-O? Do you have vegetables? Do you have, it was anything. And so I was really, I said, is this what you eat? And he said, oh yes. He said, because you see, the way to God is not through your diet. And it was like, wow. I think within a week I wasn't a vegetarian anymore. I was actually really hungry. I was just waiting for the excuse, but this was a really amazing experience. I think JR must have had a really good time with me.
Or whatever you like.
Well, what I remember leading up to JR talking to me about becoming the next traveler was it was a very challenging time for JR. So it was a time when it was just JR and myself. And you know, what I was aware of was my love for JR and my just willingness to do whatever it took to make sure that he was taken care of, you know, that I was willing to do it all, if you will. And for me, that period of time was one one of the best times of my life. Very moving, because it was really challenging outwardly, but it was so rich, because in a lot of ways there was so much less complication, because all the, I guess, the issues, the pressure and the kinds of things that had been building up, in a way they were gone and they were done. And I know that he also, the first thing that happened was I became president of the church, because one of the staff members that resigned, Edgar Vaitia, he was the president, so the position was open, so I became president of the church. So I was doing those levels of responsibility, meanwhile basically making sure JR's taken care of, which to me was job one. And then we also went ahead with a trip to Australia. That was a full staff trip with MSI services, seminars, workshops. There may have been an insight seminar, I don't remember right now. And we went ahead, we didn't cancel anything. We just found people who had been learning services. I remember Angel and Doug Gibson came along. And we got through it. We got through the period of time which led up to the conference in 1988. And I don't remember when, but I think it was at least a month beforehand that he asked if I was willing to be the next traveler. And the only thing that really came to mind to me was, well, if this helps JR, yes. And you know, I think that's amazing thinking, because it really wasn't about, you know, making a deal or something like, okay, what do you offer, and you know, what are the benefits, or there wasn't anything like that. It was much more, well, if this works, because I didn't have any sense of myself being qualified, because I really didn't look at it like I have all the inner experiences or whatever you want to consider would make you qualified, inwardly or spiritually. I didn't think that I had that. What I had was a willingness to help JR. And that part of it was crystal clear. And that's how I responded. It's, well, if it helps you, then I'm willing to do it. And then my one request was if he would stay around, because I had a kind of an expectation based on the information that I'd heard from him about the line of the travelers is they often leave after they pass the keys, meaning they die. And that, to me, would have been really tough, the hardest part. So I just said, well, if you're willing to stay around, not because of me, but if it works for you, I'd like that. So that was my one request.
With the camera.
JR, I love you. I love with all my heart and soul.
Oh, gosh. JR, you're my forever love. I love you with all my heart and all my soul, and I look forward to going to God with you. And God bless you. And everything good beyond all of our, including your wildest dreams, that you would wish or want, I wish and want for you.
Cut. Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Where do you want it set up?
Right here. Be nice. Thank you.